Ever get the feeling that some of the thoughts popping into your head, especially the negative or self-serving ones, aren't entirely yours?
That's a fascinating thought, isn't it? And it leads us right into today's topic.
Okay, let's unpack this because we're diving deep into a truly unique perspective on this today. C.S. Lewis's The Screwtape Letters.
Ah, yes. A
Yeah.
remarkably insightful book, and darkly funny at times, too.
Mhm.
Lewis frames it as a series of letters between two demons.
Right, there's Screwtape, the experienced senior demon, and his nephew, Wormwood, who's sort of learning the ropes.
Exactly. Screwtape is basically giving Wormwood a master class in how to tempt your human, they call him the patient, away from faith. It's like a demonic training manual.
It really is. And this deep dive, it feels like getting an insider's view on spiritual temptation, but, not in a dramatic fire and brimstone kind of way.
No, not at all.
Mm.
Lewis, writing a Screwtape, shows the really sneaky, almost imperceptible tactics, ways to nudge our thoughts, our behaviors, particularly around faith and just daily life.
And our source material for this comes straight from the letters themselves, excerpts, where Screwtape gives Wormwood these very specific instructions, analyzing his progress, or often his lack of progress.
What's so striking right from the start is Screwtape saying that the old way, directly arguing against faith,
Yeah.
that it's pretty much useless now.
Yeah, he says people don't really evaluate ideas based on true or false anymore. Is that right?
That's his observation, yes.
Hmm.
We tend to categorize them differently now. Labels like academic or practical, outworn, maybe cutting edge.
It's less about deep conviction and more about, well, what sounds good or seems useful right now.
Precisely. And Screwtape points out that jargon, sort of vague, trendy language, is way more effective than actual argument for keeping people away from the church. That's a key insight.
So don't bother trying to prove materialism is true.
No, don't waste the effort. The goal, Screwtape advises, is just to make materialism feel strong or stark, maybe courageous. The philosophy of the future.
It's all about the branding, the association, not the substance.
Exactly. It's clever because, as Screwtape warns, getting into a real argument can backfire. It might actually help the enemy Lewis's term for God in the book.
How so?
Because real reasoning,
Yeah.
it wakes up the patient's own critical thinking. And who knows where that might lead? It could lead them toward faith.
So the preferred tactic.
Keep the patient focused on the surface, the stream of immediate sense experiences, what Screwtape just labels real life.
Just keep them busy with the day-to-day stuff.
Right. Present that sensory input as the only reality that matters, without ever prompting them to ask, what is real anyway?
Luce gives that brilliant little example, doesn't he, with the atheist in the British Museum.
Oh, yes. Screwtape tells this story. The atheist is having this dawning moment, maybe questioning his beliefs.
And Screwtape's advice to the tempter he was mentoring then, just suggest lunch.
Exactly. The immediate, the mundane lunchtime. And poof, the potentially life-changing thought is just gone. It shows how easily we're distracted.
Profound questions derailed by a rumbling stomach. It's almost comical.
It really highlights the strategy. Distraction through the ordinary. Prevent any sustained thought about the big questions.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit. What about the church itself? You'd think that'd be a safe zone, right? A fortress against this stuff.
You would think. But Screwtape has this unsettling twist. He sees the church, or rather the human experience of church, as a potential ally for them.
An ally. How?
Well, Lewis, through Screwtape, is careful here. He distinguishes the true universal church, which Screwtape admits is formidable, from the local, human, often flawed experience.
So it's the gap between the ideal and the reality.
Precisely. That's the vulnerability Wormwood needs to exploit. The core idea is using the flawed earthly version to undermine belief in the ideal itself.
So focus on the negatives, the maybe slightly dreary building, the liturgy that feels a bit stale.
And especially the other people. The congregation.
The person singing off-key next to you?
Yeah.
Or the squeaky shoes?
Exactly those things. Screwtape tells Wormwood to make the patient fixate on those superficial flaws. The goal is to plant the idea that these little annoyances somehow invalidate the other person's faith, or maybe even the whole institution.
It shows how easily we judge a spiritual path by the imperfect people on it, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It plays on that gap between maybe your idealized picture of Christians and then meeting, well, just ordinary flawed people in the pews.
People like us.
People like us. And Lewis, through Screwtape, links this to other common letdowns, like a kid loving the Odyssey stories but then hating the grind of learning Greek.
Or the difference between the romance of being in love and the day-to-day reality of marriage.
Right. That inevitable drop from the perfect vision to the often messy everyday reality. It's a universal experience they can tap into.
Screwtape also mentions something about the enemy's curious fantasy of humans becoming free servants and periods of dryness.
Yes, those times when faith doesn't feel exciting or vibrant. Screwtape sees those troughs, as he calls them, as prime opportunities for temptation.
Because the feeling isn't there.
Exactly. The key insight is that even the absence of strong spiritual feelings can be weaponized. The patient might start thinking, well, if I don't feel it, maybe it's not real, or maybe those other people are just faking it too.
So the trick is to stop the patient from realizing their own struggles don't negate the whole thing.
Precisely. Prevent them from thinking, okay, my faith feels weak right now, and that person has annoying habits, but that doesn't mean Christianity itself isn't true.
Let's turn to family. Screwtape gives some particularly nasty advice about the patient's relationship with his mother.
He certainly does. Lewis really dissects the dynamics there. Screwtape outlines this strategy that uses the closeness and the potential for friction within families.
How does that work?
He encourages the patient to get really absorbed in his inner life, his lofty spiritual thoughts and duties.
While neglecting basic kindness to his mother.
Exactly. Neglecting the simple elementary stuff. The underlying idea is that we can use grand ideals to excuse being unkind in everyday life.
That's a classic trap, isn't it? Getting so caught up in the spiritual that you forget common decency.
It is. And Screwtape even suggests ways to make the patient's prayers for his mother, well, innocuous, harmless.
How can prayer be harmless?
By making them super spiritual, focusing only on her soul in some abstract way, never on her actual needs like a rheumatism or just needing a hand with something.
So the prayers become disconnected from reality.
Completely. It reveals how easily prayer can become just an abstract exercise, not something that feels real love and action.
And that creates this weird split, right? Praying for some idealized version of mom.
While being irritable and short with the actual mom sitting across the table. Screwtape even tells Wormwood to make the patient see her annoying habits not just as habits, but as deliberate sins.
Wow. Judging those closest to us way more harshly.
It widens that gap. And Lewis, through Screwtape, is brilliant on how we fixate on others' irritating tones or expressions, assuming the worst, while being totally blind to our own annoying traits.
Our own lack of self-awareness is a major weak spot then.
Huge. Now, prayer itself, obviously central to faith, is another major target for Screwtape.
He wants to undermine real prayer.
Absolutely. He pushes for prayer that's more spontaneous, inward, informal, basically prayer that lacks concentration and real effort.
Like just sort of vaguely thinking good thoughts.
Kind of. He even uses the poet Coleridge as an example, someone just composing his spirit to love rather than actually, praying to God. The insight is that you can generate the feeling of prayerfulness without the actual connection.
A superficial piety. And he dismisses posture, too.
Yeah, tells the patient posture doesn't matter, which ignores the connection between body and soul, something spiritual traditions often emphasize. It reveals how these seemingly small things can actually affect our focus.
What's the main tactic during prayer, then?
Diversion. Get the patient's gaze turned away from God and onto themselves. Make them focus on manufacturing feelings. Am I feeling charitable enough? Am I feeling brave enough through willpower?
So it becomes about self-analysis, not seeking God.
Exactly. It shifts from relationship to self-performance. And then judge the prayer success based only on the feelings produced, ignoring if you're tired or stressed or whatever.
Reducing it all to emotion. Okay, this is maybe unexpected, but what about war? You'd think hell would just love war.
You'd think. And Wormwood is initially thrilled, delirious with joy, as Screwtape puts it. But Screwtape pulls him up short.
He's not so keen. Why not?
He sees the suffering, sure. That's a short-term refreshment for the demons. But he worries about the long-term effects. War, he fears, can actually pull people away from themselves.
Make them focus on higher values, causes bigger than themselves.
Precisely. That's the risk. External crises can sometimes foster positive qualities, courage, self-sacrifice, unity that actually work against hell's goals.
People might turn to God, or at least focus outwards.
Right. And Screwtape complains about the enemy's perceived unfairness regarding people who die in war. Even if someone dies for a cause, hell thinks is bad if they genuinely thought it was good.
God might still value their intention.
That's Screwtape's fear. It shows this fundamental difference in how good and evil are judged. Hell only cares about the outcome for them. The enemy seems to care about the heart.
So the worst outcome for hell in wartime.
Someone dying, prepared, conscious of sacrifice. Screwtape would rather war just breeds cruelty and unchastity, but he's wary of it sparking faith or selflessness. He then gets into exploiting uncertainty and fear, especially around the patient's potential military service.
The anxiety of the unknown future.
Exactly. The strategy is to fill the patient's mind with contradictory pictures. Maybe he'll be safe. Maybe he'll die horribly. Keep him swinging between hope and fear.
A kind of mental paralysis.
Yes, because the point is to keep him thinking about what will happen to him, not what he should do right now. The enemy, Screwtape says, wants us focused on doing our duty in the present. Hell wants us lost in anxieties about the future.
And he twists, "Thy will be done."
Turns it from acceptance of the present into just raw fear of future possibilities. Makes it harder to genuinely resign yourself to whatever today brings.
He mentions a spiritual law here, too.
A very significant one. He says unself-conscious focus outward on things, on objects, tends to favor hell. But turning the mind inward, self-examination, tends to favor the enemy.
Interesting. And directing malice close by, but benevolence far away?
Yes. Hate your neighbors, the people you actually interact with, but feel warm and fuzzy about humanity in the abstract or some distant cause. It completely inverts natural charity.
Like that concentric circles idea. Push real virtue outwards into fantasy, pull selfishness inwards to the will.
Precisely. And Screwtape adds, almost as an aside, that their current policy is actually to conceal their own existence.
Make people think demons are just a joke.
Yeah, the cartoon devil with horns and a pitchfork, that works for them. If people don't believe demons are real, they can operate much more freely, under the radar.
Clever. And in times of turmoil like war, he encourages extremes.
All extremes, he says, except extreme devotion to the enemy, of course. He loves factions, small, smug groups convinced of their own righteousness.
Breeding grounds for pride and hate.
Exactly. Think about pacifism or patriotism. Good things, potentially. But Screwtape's goal is to make that cause the patient's real religion more important than faith itself.
So earthly goals become the end, and faith just a tool to get there.
That's the desired inversion.
Then Lewis, through Screwtape, brings in this big idea, the law of undulation.
Yes, fundamental.
Yeah.
The natural rhythm of human life. Ups and downs, peaks and troughs in energy, emotion, interest. It's just how we're built.
And Wormwood thinks the patient's current down period, his spiritual dryness, is his own doing.
He does. He's proud of it. But Screwtape corrects him sharply. Says, no, this is natural. This is how humans are. The insight is crucial. Spiritual life isn't a constant high.
And surprisingly, the troughs are actually more important for growth.
From the enemy's perspective, yes, often more so than the peaks. Because it's in the dry times, when there's no emotional reward, that you show real commitment. You do your duty just because it is your duty.
It highlights commitment beyond just feeling good.
All right. Screwtape contrasts hell's goal absorbing the human will entirely with the enemy's goal, willing conformity. The enemy, he says, can only woo, not force.
And the most dangerous moment for hell.
When a human, feeling nothing, maybe even feeling abandoned, still chooses to try and obey God's will, that's a disaster for them.
But the troughs offer temptations, too.
Oh, absolutely. Sensual temptations, especially when you're feeling low. and manipulating the patient's thoughts about the dryness, making them despair, making them think it'll last forever, making them think the initial fervor should have lasted forever.
Playing on unrealistic expectations.
Exactly. Stop them understanding it's just a natural phase.
Okay, what about social life? Friends, acquaintances?
Another key battleground. Screwtape sees huge potential in the patient's new, smart and skeptical friends, exploiting vanity.
Oh.
By encouraging the patient to subtly betray his own faith just to fit in, laughing at slightly cynical jokes, nodding along with views he doesn't really hold.
That slow slide, becoming what you pretend to be.
Precisely. It's insidious. We adopt attitudes to gain acceptance, and Screwtape advises delaying the patient's recognition that this is a temptation. Make warnings about the world sound old-fashioned like Puritanism.
Make questioning it seem unsophisticated.
Right. And Lewis, through Screwtape, gets into laughter here, too. Distinguishes between joy, fun, the joke proper, and flippancy.
Okay. Joy and fun are bad for Hell.
Generally, yes. Too positive, too connected to the enemy. But the joke, proper humor based on incongruity that has potential.
How so?
Especially with the English Screwtape notes, who value their sense of humor. Jokes can be used to destroy shame, make vices seem trivial, laughable, acceptable. Humor becomes the all-excusing grace.
Using laughter to downplay serious things. Now, the path to hell, you mentioned it's gradual.
Overwhelmingly so, according to Screwtape. Not sudden, dramatic falls. More like a gentle slope. Sail down smoothly.
So you might not even notice the change.
That's the goal. Yeah. Keep up the outward habits, going to church, saying prayers while the inner reality slowly decays. Cultivate this vague, persistent unease that makes thinking about God uncomfortable.
So you avoid real prayer.
Increasingly.
Yeah.
You might say prayers, but you don't really want contact. Let sleeping worms lie, as Screwtape puts it. And eventually, you don't even need big, exciting sins to tempt someone.
Distraction.
Just nothing. Hours, days, years can be stolen away by trivialities, meaningless distractions, not grand wickedness, just emptiness. That, Screwtape says, is the safest road to hell. Gradual, soft, no signposts.
That's chilling. But what if the patient does wake up? What about genuine repentance?
That's a major setback for hell, a disaster. Screwtape describes the patient having a second conversion, feeling the asphyxiating cloud of the enemy's direct presence.
And he blames wormwood.
Oh, yes. For blunders, like allowing the patient simple, real pleasures, enjoying a good book, a walk in nature. Why are those dangerous? Because real pleasure, Screwtape fears, exposes the cheapness, the trumpery of the worldly thrills they offer. Authentic joy is the enemy's territory.
It highlights the contrast.
Exactly. And Screwtape contrasts their goals again. The enemy wants to detach humans from self-will to find their true selves. Hell wants to detach them from their own nature for any reason, even seemingly good ones, like eradicating innocent personal tastes.
Even liking certain foods or hobbies is a threat.
Because it involves a kind of self-forgetfulness, enjoying something outside the self. After repentance, the key for hell is to stop it translating into action. Keep the patient stuck in good intentions.
And humility. That's good.
Right. It should be. But Screwtape sees an angle. The patient's renewed humility alarms him because it's not about confident resolutions, just hope for daily help. So the tactic,
Let me guess. Make him proud of his humility.
bingo, draw his attention to his humility. Get him thinking, wow, I'm being really humble right now. Which, of course, instantly breeds pride.
It twists the whole point. True humility is meant to be self-forgetful, focusing out towards God and others.
Right. Not a low opinion of your talents, but simply not thinking about yourself much at all. Screwtape distorts it into a kind of inverted vanity.
Manipulating time comes up again too, doesn't it?
Yes, a key strategy. The enemy, Screwtape says, deals in eternity and the present, the point where time touches eternity.
So hell wants us focused elsewhere.
On the future. Because the future is the least like eternity. It's all potential, uncertainty, not reality. That's where vices like fear, greed, lust, ambition live, always looking ahead.
So distract from present duties and realities.
Exactly. Twist anxiety about the future or false hopes for it. Even use negative labels like complacency to attack simple, healthy contentment with the present. break up any natural happiness.
Okay, back to church for a moment. Screwtape doesn't like the patient settling in one parish.
No, he's worried. He'd much rather the patient become a taster or connoisseur of churches, always shopping around,
Why is that better for Hell?
because it makes the patient a critic, not a pupil. He's judging the sermon, the music, the vicar. Instead of being open to receiving something, it fosters pride and prevents settling into a real community.
And he prefers churches based on shared opinions over local parishes.
Yes, because parishes based on location bring different sorts of people together, forcing them to practice charity. Churches based on shared opinions could just become comfortable clubs or factions, breeding division.
Factionalism, even over small things, is good for them.
Very much so. Anything that divides.
He touches briefly on love and marriage, too.
He does. Contrasts hell's philosophy separation, competition with the enemy's idea of love and unity, marriage, family. It's all part of the enemy's plan to drag in love.
And they distort it.
Of course. Focus only on the feeling of being in love as the only valid reason for marriage. Discourage marrying for loyalty, companionship, mutual help. Use love as an excuse for foolish choices.
Screwtape even seems genuinely baffled by the idea of God really loving humans.
He admits he made a careless remark about it. He fundamentally cannot grasp disinterested love. It's an insoluble question. For now, why would the enemy bother? It's apparently central to the whole conflict.
So love is just another tool.
Everything is just a tool. Nothing is good or bad in itself, only whether it pushes the patient towards the enemy or towards them. Even marriage can be used strategically to create difficulties.
And he talks about two kinds of Venus, two ideals of women.
Yes, a terrestrial one compatible with charity and marriage, and an infernal one desire mixed with cruelty, treating the woman as an object. The goal is to cultivate that infernal Venus.
Leading to misery, whether through affairs or marrying the wrong person.
Exactly. Then there's peevishness, irritability. Screwtape links it to the feeling of being wronged, having your rights violated.
Especially the assumption, my time is my own.
Which Screwtape points out is absurd. Humans don't create time, they can't keep it, and theoretically they owe all their time to the enemy. But hell encourages that possessive feeling.
My time, my body, my rights.
Fostering that sense of ownership makes things like chastity seem like an infringement, confusing the different senses of
But then disaster strikes. From hell's view, the patient falls for a genuinely Christian woman.
Screwtape is horrified, describes her goodness, her family, their inexplicable love for each other. It's all a deadly odor to him, a huge problem.
So if you can't remove spirituality, you corrupt it.
That's the next move. Become an angel of light. Twist spirituality itself. A key area is the boundary between theology and politics, the social implications of faith.
How is that exploited?
By promoting things like a constantly changing historical Jesus. Get people focused on academic debates about who Jesus was historically, rather than who he is now and what he did.
Substitute a vague academic figure for a living relationship.
Precisely. Replace the real presence in prayer and sacrament with research.
And spiritual pride comes back here.
Especially among intelligent Christians. That subtle feeling of being smarter, more insightful than others. Screwtape wants to inflate that in the patient, make him proud of being in this new, clever Christian circle his girlfriend belongs to.
Confusing belonging to a group with actual faith.
Yes, making Christianity feel like an exclusive inner ring, a mystery religion for the smart set, cultivating smugness.
Then there's Christianity
A
and...
huge danger, Screwtape says.
Yeah.
Christianity shouldn't just be itself. It needs to be Christianity and something else. The crisis, the new psychology, the social justice cause, whatever is fashionable.
Why is that dangerous?
It exploits the human horror of the same old thing. We crave novelty. Hell twists this natural desire into a demand for constant change, even in faith. It breeds heresy and instability.
Makes tradition seem boring, stagnant.
Exactly. Elevates novelty above truth. Uses fashion to distract. Makes people ask, is it progressive? Not, is it true? Is it right?
Even something like unselfishness can be twisted.
Oh, yes. That desire to appear unselfish. Screwtape describes arguments where both sides are fighting tooth and nail for what they claim the other person wants.
While building up massive resentment underneath.
Absolutely. each feeling terribly noble and unappreciated, smuggling in bitterness under the cloak of selflessness, even in courtship, forgetting that love is not enough. You need real charity, real communication.
Prayer comes up again, misdirection revisited.
Right. If the patient starts praying about his distractions, that's a danger zone. Screwtape advises raising intellectual doubts about petitionary prayer itself. Isn't it a bit primitive? Shouldn't we just focus on praise?
Well, ignoring that even asking for daily bread or spiritual strength is petitionary.
Exactly. So doubt. Use the heads I win, tails you lose argument. If the prayer isn't answered, it proves prayer is useless. If it's answered, well, it probably would have happened anyway. Play on our limited understanding of time and causation.
So, war again. The real danger of war for hell.
It's about the patient's state if he dies. Right now, Screwtape worries. The patient is actually quite resistant. He's in love, he feels connected to neighbors, reliant on God because of the danger. Dying now would be a loss for hell.
They prefer the long game.
Yes, the slow, grinding weariness of middle age, whether through boring prosperity or nagging adversity. Time is usually their ally. Keep the patient alive, for now, to wear him down later.
So during the bombing raids, what's the strategy?
Tempt him towards cowardice, or maybe prideful false courage, or best of all, hatred of the enemy. Genuine courage is a problem because hell can't create virtue.
Hatred is easier to manage.
Much. Especially if you can muddle the conscience, make him feel he's hating on behalf of the victims. Combine hatred with fear. The hatred makes the misery of cowardice more bearable, less shameful.
But outright cowardice is risky too.
Very. It might lead to self-knowledge, self-loathing, maybe even repentance. Screwtape suspects the enemy allows a dangerous world partly to force these moral issues to make courage necessary. Cowardice might teach the patient too much about himself.
So how do they tempt towards cowardice subtly?
Focus on vague ideas of safety within duty.
Yeah.
Build imaginary lifelines. Create unconscious reservations. It's the act of cowardice they want, not necessarily the feeling of fear itself.
And fatigue during the raids.
Another angle. Screwtape's initially disappointed. The patient behaved well in the first raid, scared, but did his duty, but fatigue changes things.
Makes people irritable.
Especially moderate fatigue combined with unexpected demands. That's prime territory for peevishness. And feed false hopes that the raids will end soon so the weariness feels worse, more unbearable.
Aim for bearing it only for a reasonable period, not total commitment.
Exactly. Avoid that full surrender to the present hardship.
And then the end comes for the patient.
Yes, the ultimate loss for hell. He dies during an air raid, but he's in a state of grace.
What does Screwtape describe seeing?
It's devastating for him. The patient in his final moments sees reality clearly, recognizes the good he'd always faintly sensed, sees God, him, in the form of a man, experiences divine light not as heat, but as cool clarity. He's free.
And hell just doesn't get it.
Or he can't comprehend it. Screwtape rages against Wormwood, but the despair is palpable. Their whole realist philosophy, their understanding of the universe, is shown to be utterly inadequate. They failed.
Wow. So as we kind of pull back from this dive into the Screwtape letters, it's clear Lewis, through Screwtape, gives us this incredibly detailed map of, well, subtle temptation.
It's really masterfully done.
Yeah.
How easily good intentions get twisted, how our weak spots are exploited, how our focus is constantly pulled away from what really matters, from the divine, from the present moment.
Definitely. And those recurring themes really stick out, don't they? The power of language, that jargon he talked about, the exploitation of our desire for novelty, the horror of the same old thing.
And that constant effort to divert us from now pushing us into anxiety about the future or vague regrets about the past.
So maybe the final thought for you listening at home is to consider which of these tactics might be subtly playing out in your own life or just in the culture around us.
Yeah, what jargon or appealing labels do you notice being used?
Yeah.
Where does that chase for novelty maybe overshadow real contentment? Are there subtle prides or maybe distorted ideas of unselfishness causing friction in relationships?
It's definitely something to mull over, even though it's framed from this, fictional, demonic viewpoint. Understanding these strategies Lewis lays out, it gives such valuable insight into our own choices, doesn't it?
Absolutely, into the forces that might be influencing us, often without us even realizing it.